I was born when my dad was in his early 20s, and my stepmother Elle, who is 34, is older than me, who is 25. Alan and I are both expecting at the same time. I am 32 weeks along, and she is 34 weeks. Both of us are having girls. I have always wanted to name my firstborn child Elizabeth in honor of my grandmother, who reared me while my father was attending medical school. We've agreed that my girlfriend, who prefers the name Elizabeth, will go by Elizabeth Catherine in honor of both of our grandparents. Additionally, we've chosen to keep the name a secret. But Elle and Dad just used an embroidered blanket to reveal their daughter's name on social media. Elizabeth Gabrielle, but Lizzie for short, is her name. Elizabeth in memory of Elle's closest friend Beth, who died away the previous year, and Gabrielle in memory of Elle's mother, who died 4 years ago. When Elena discussed baby names, she never brought up the use of Elizabeth. To be honest, that bothers me. I chose the name first because I find a lot of meaning in it. Because I was also using Elizabeth and it would be strange to have two Elizabeths, especially given how close they will be, I messaged Elle and told her and her father to choose anything else. Elle told me she wanted to honor Beth by naming her daughter after her, and she wasn't going to let this go. Whether I liked it or not, they were naming her Elizabeth, my dad told me when I spoke to him. He informed me that I was being conceited, believing that I could choose which names people may use and that my justification for using the name Elizabeth was more significant than Elle's. Dad also told me that I would have to choose a different name for their daughter Elizabeth because she is probably going to be born first. Since then, Elle has told me I'm being foolish and requested me to stop talking to her until I've made amends. Am I the moron for telling my stepmother that the baby name I choose isn't appropriate? My dad knew I wanted to use Elizabeth since we had discussed it frequently after Gran went away, even though we haven't revealed my baby's name Elizabeth Catherine. It's you who is the fool. Elle's motivation for using the name doesn't matter more than yours. There can definitely be two Elizabeths, especially if you give them distinct nicknames. You don't own a name. Look at all the Irish families with 5 Johns going by different nicknames. Don't let something as insignificant as this ruin your connection with your father. I concur. Elizabeth is the most beautiful woman's name in the world, and she is the name of my first daughter. Elizabeth was the name of all my dolls. I gave her the names Elizabeth Taylor, the world's most beautiful woman, and Elizabeth I, the most powerful woman to have ever lived. Elizabeth, the late mother of my ex, was also named Elizabeth, but she went by Betty, her mother went by Ruby. Beth is the name of my daughter. Every family can have more than one Elizabeth, and each daughter will have a nickname. That's right. I don't understand the problem, since the stepmother has already said that Lizzie is their short name. The OP sounds like this: I understand that you want to remember your buddy who passed away, but you can't use the name Elizabeth since I have first dibs on it. Just a year has passed since this unfortunate woman lost her dearest friend, and her stepmother is naming her child after a person she loved. That's an unfortunate coincidence, not name stealing. I was hoping for a narrative along the lines of "we told my dad in secret, but she found out, and now wants to name her kid Aricaria," but instead I got a popular name with sincere motivations for naming. Furthermore, I believe that OP has no claim to the name because the grandmother was the father's mother. However, OP's father made a foolish decision by knowing that OP intended to use the name. OP, you're not the fool, your father is caving in to his younger, fresh wife. They knew full well that you intended to use that name anyway. Your father doesn't own a name, so I don't think it's fair that he advised you to change your daughter's name. Use the name you had in mind, they will understand. I agree, the father is a moron for claiming that the original poster will need to change the name because his daughter will be born first. If the OP had her baby early and the stepmom had the baby late, proving the dad utterly wrong about who was born first, that would make for an extremely humorous situation. My cousin and I actually experienced this. I was early and he was late. Oh my god, who is this dumb group's leader? This sounds messy, and perhaps, just possibly, you and your dad's wife are engaging in a friendly competition that has nothing to do with names. Simply try to make everyone happy and avoid interacting with them. If your dad cared about you and your child at all, he would be too preoccupied with his new child. He can wait an additional 20 years to meet his new children's grandchildren. My name is 45 and I live with my wife 43 and our 2 children, a teenage boy and a tween girl. We live in the same city as my sister Margot, 33, her wife Alexandra, 35, and their 2 children, a toddler girl and a young grammar school-age boy. My son is quite fond of his cousins and frequently requests to visit his aunts. I send Margot over fairly frequently, maybe once a week or so, because she says it's okay. Margot lived in a different state before to this, so it began around 6 months ago. Just to give you some background, my wife, our children, and I are all Christians. Margot and Alex share the same atheist beliefs. We all adore each other, thus it has no bearing at all on our connection. But my son has started saying remarks about most topics that sound a lot like what Alex would say. Since Alex is a surgeon and my son greatly admires her, he is susceptible to her opinions. At the meal, he would try to sway our opinions by saying all these things. I called Alex and informed her that she was having an impact on my son. I requested that she give him some room to think things out on his own. She remarked that regardless of his beliefs, he was a bright youngster who would grow up to be a delightful guy, and that getting more information would only benefit him. When I begged her to please stop talking to him about these things, she became irate and claimed that I was being controlling and that she would let my son decide what they spoke about as long as he was welcome to visit. Alex and Margot are both being aloof with me. I can't help but wonder, am I the idiot here? You are the moron, lol. I begged her to allow him some room to think things out on his own. I believe what you're saying is that I asked her to give him some room so we could continue asking him questions. The child asks questions, Auntie responds, and the parents become irate because they believe that asking questions is bad. This story is not new to me. But trying to pull the he needs to make his own decisions but only using the information I provide him crap is very dumb, dude. If they had been upfront and said, we're going to raise him our way until he's an adult, then he can do what he wants, I would have respected Opie more. Without information, how is your son supposed to make an informed choice? It seems that you want him to be a blind sheep and adopt your beliefs. My husband, a 35-year-old man, and I are the only ones left together after his accident a few years ago. My son is still too young to attend grammar school. It's been difficult because my husband was the primary provider. I finish work at 8, whereas he leaves school at 3. My sister-in-law is unemployed, her husband runs a profitable company, and she provides support. My son's sister-in-law gets him up from school and takes him to her place so they can hang out and finish their homework until I can get to him. She caught me on Wednesday while I was already at work, telling me she couldn't pick him up from school because she and her husband had purchased last-minute concert tickets. I was upset. If I had prior knowledge and could have made alternative plans, that would be one thing, but she just surprised me. I reminded her that she made this promise and that breaking it would be terribly bad, and I encouraged her to think it over. She attended the concert nonetheless. I lost out on all those hours because I had to leave work 6 hours early. She placed me in this situation, so I reasoned, she ought to have to pay me back. My son and I are only able to subsist on it. For the money I lost out on, I sent her a Venmo. She sent me a mean text a few minutes later complaining that she wasn't paying for it. She won't pick up my son, so I had to send him home with one of his buddies yesterday and today. I told a few acquaintances, and they are divided on whether or not I should have gone forward, but I need the money, and she promised to take care of my son and me. That is more significant than getting wasted at a concert. Edit, she gives me unpaid assistance with my son. This is just incredibly foolish. You want to charge your sister-in-law money for babysitting while she provides free care? You are such a fool, wow. You are not your sister-in-law's personal slave. Your child is your concern, but it appears that you have placed so much parenting duty on your sister-in-law that you now feel as though she owes you money to care for your child. It does not operate that way. It's a strange attitude. She used quotes to say that she helps out. The degree of disdain shown to someone who was doing her this favor right away. I consider myself fortunate to have had my brother's children available to me for love, guidance, and support for more than half of my life as an aunt. Even while it plays a significant role in my life, they never had the right or the inclination to demand that I give up my life because they are parents. Op doesn't seem to get that her priorities and those of her sister-in-law can occasionally diverge. I would never again watch your child, lady. You could get a nanny. You are the fool for requesting money through Venmo and without having a backup plan. What if this really was an emergency? Then, how would you have responded? You need to make sure you have backup arrangements for your son's daycare. Your sister-in-law has been picking up your son from school, cooking and possibly supplying snacks for 5 or 6 hours a day, 5 days a week, at no cost to you. That is quite a bit. Daycare and aftercare came at a monthly cost of $1,200. If an unpaid employment required me to pay for time missed due to illness, I would most likely quit. You ought to reframe your way of thinking. He works 5 days a week, spends the weekends at home, then goes back to work at 4 a.m. on Mondays. He puts in a lot of work when he's away, which leaves him exhausted on the weekends. We went on a lovely picnic with our child a month ago, the three of us. We got married at the Botanical Gardens, so it was even more special. Since our child had never visited, I wanted to take my time, stroll through the gardens after lunch, and enjoy the sunshine. I was disappointed, but I also understood that he was tired and didn't want to stroll around. However, I went for a walk with our child without him. He was whining about how exhausted he was on the way home. He took a snooze when we came home. Even though I completed all of the cleaning and chores as I usually do on Sundays, he continued to take his alone time as the afternoon turned into evening. I arranged my birthday cake and put dinner in the oven. My dad had come to have dinner with us when he arrived. My spouse poured himself a few drinks after supper and joined my dad to watch sports. I asked him to help me get our toddler ready for bed. My kid was having trouble falling asleep, so I would generally take him on a short trip to assist him get to sleep. He had no desire to assist or even take Bubba for a spin. He was drinking, so he couldn't have anyway. However, I became quite irate. I had not had a private moment. I told my hubby I was in a foul mood and took Bubs for a drive because I was weary too. Upon returning, I tucked Bubs into bed, only to find him dozing off in preparation for his early morning journey. This kind of made me crazy. He came out of the bedroom when he heard me stomping around, telling me to shut up because he had to go to bed. I guess I lost it. I gave him some dirty looks, took my keys, and walked out. After a couple of hours, I finally went home and fell asleep on the couch. He believes that I was exaggerating, and since he had to take an early flight and is away from home all week, he didn't do anything wrong. Not that I believe I am. My birthday only occurs once a year. Valentine's Day and other commercial holidays are not observed by us. Birthdays and anniversaries hold significance for me. Arriving at the airport nearly completely exhausted, he had a rough week at work. I feel like I should apologize to him, but I also think he should apologize to me. Usually, I don't expect him to accomplish anything on the weekends. In addition, I am a full-time worker with over 40 hours a week and the only parent for 5 days out of 7. Most weekends are spent getting ready for Monday by resting. Not the fool. You two work full-time jobs, but do all of the housekeeping and kid care as well? Yes, you put in a lot more effort than he does, and he doesn't even care to celebrate your birthday with you. I believe it's time for you to step up. You either walk away from him or something changes. Your home is already headed by a single parent. It sounds like a very challenging situation for all parties. Everybody is overburdened. Nobody is sleeping well enough. Nobody spends enough time with their families. Everyone is agitated, including the children, and there is no time for leisure or self-care. Why, it seems, don't they relocate near their husband's workplace? Why does he not work in his hometown? What does Opie stand to gain from the partnership? Not that I can see one. I find this arrangement completely nonsensical. The husband could probably find something local if they're both working full-time, even if it means taking a wage sacrifice. They work FIFO mining somewhere up in the middle of nowhere, and they reside in the suburbs of Western Australia, at least that's how it goes in my imagination. It would probably be less expensive to stay away from the family's required support network and not relocate the entire family there. This has nothing to do with your birthday, Opie. That merely served as your turning point. You two are having trouble communicating. Your spouse and you are not seeing eye to eye, but there is an imbalance in your relationship. I would recommend that you both attend marriage counseling, but I'm not sure if that's a realistic option given your busy schedules or if you could use some of your FIFO money to hire a cleaner instead. If nothing else, you would have time to unwind and mend the marriage then. My mom worked until I was around 4 years old, but my paternal grandparents took care of me mostly since my dad died when I was still a baby. I'm not sure what went on between them when she first met Jason, but there was definitely something strange between them. However, I am aware that 6 months after they first met and right before they were engaged, my mother was in an accident. My grandparents looked after me until my mother was able to recover. I know my mother and Jason were upset by this. My mother claims that all I wanted as a child was to be with my grandparents, thus they felt that my grandparents should have left me with Jason and allowed me to grow close to him. And when I realized I couldn't see her after the accident, I sobbed for them. I don't really remember it, but it sounds like a social worker might have been involved. I was 5 when I was adopted by Jason. My mother and he had recently tied the knot. They informed me that Jason was going to be my father, even though I requested them not to. I never addressed him as dad. They got upset when I named him my stepdad and always addressed him by his first name. They held my grandparents responsible since they told me a lot about my dad. Mom wanted to sever my relationship with my grandparents, but the courts ruled that I should be allowed to keep that relationship going because I was very attached to them and they were my biological dad's family. In the end, I was able to spend one overnight with them each month and see them every other weekend. I adored it. Jason never really made me feel at ease. He made a valiant effort to be my father. He would give me special treatment and give up his day to spend time with me. However, he became envious when he realized that I had a picture of my dad next to my bed, and he would become irritated if he were to catch me chatting to the picture when I was younger. I used to believe more in people existing after death and knowing what we said to them and wrote for them, thus I would occasionally write notes for my dad's grave on Father's Day when I was younger. I understand that using his first name while writing and conversing with a father I had never met and would never recall hurt Jason. However, it didn't affect how I felt or feel now. I was not won over by his disdain of my grandparents either. Although I wouldn't claim Jason to be my father, you would believe I love him. I am currently in my 20s and engaged to a fantastic person. I'm heading down the aisle with my grandmother at my side. I let Jason and my mother know in advance so they could be ready. Jason inquired about money, something I never brought up with him. He offered to pay so he could give me away when I told him my fiancé and I were paying. I lost it, telling him once more that I had never asked for it, and told him it was offensive that he thought he could get paid to lead me down the aisle. Considering that I know he views me as his daughter and that I have never accepted him as my father, he and my mother believe I am indifferent to his sentiments. Am I the foolish one? Not the fool. It makes natural that you would rather have one of your grandparents lead you down the aisle rather than a man who seems to be pressuring you into becoming his daughter's father and attempting to buy his way into your ceremony, given how deeply you two have bonded. He should be more interested in seeing you happy than in seeing you walk down the aisle if he truly loves you. Many parents are unaware that if they stop attempting to push a bond, there's a strong chance one will develop. You probably could have gotten closer to Jason, for instance, if he had been more confident and hadn't tried to drive you away from your grandparents and become upset that you possessed a picture of your father. Yes, it is impossible for someone to attempt to bribe his way into your ceremony following years of a poisonous relationship. You were deprived of this option at a very young age, even though custom dictates that the father of the bride walks down the aisle. It's also reasonable that you would prefer someone else to accompany you down the aisle given that you never shared that kind of relationship with your stepdad. I'm sad your mom and stepdad had a negative reaction, but I think it's great that you selected your grandmother. I hope you have an amazing wedding and a long and happy marriage.